You're listening to the Business Club for Grown-Ups podcast with Jessica Fernley. So hi there, welcome to the Business Club for Grown-Ups podcast with me, Jessica Fernley. I'm so excited for this first episode. I've been planning this podcast for some time now, but I decided to just jump in, take the plunge, get started, and really start to talk about the things which I think are really important. So you may feel like you know me quite well already, or this may be one of the first things of mine that you've ever heard. So I thought I'd just take some time in this first episode together to tell you my story, really, to share how I got to where I am at the moment and share some of the challenges that I've had along the way, really. So the first thing is that I'm a business coach. I'm really passionate about helping people get the business that they've always wanted. And I think often when people work with me, they have been feeling for a while that things are not right in their business. And there's a certain element of frustration where people just feel like, I've just spent ages trying to get this business to work and I've been unhappy for a while. I almost feel like, should I just give up my business? And almost straight away, there's usually some very simple changes that we can make that have a big difference. So the things I like to help people with are feeling like they'd like more time freedom when it comes to their business. They're working too many hours. They're fed up of feeling like they constantly put all their time into their business and they don't see the right things come out of it. It's also a case of wanting more profit, which I think as women, sometimes we can feel so funny about saying, do you know what, I'd really like more money back from this business. I'm investing a lot of my time and my money and it just isn't bringing in the profits in the way that it should be. And the third thing I help people with is finding the right clients for them, getting them to a point where they can just say, do you know what, this client is not right for me. I'm not going to take on working with them. I'm not going to continue this working relationship. And finding the clients which are just the perfect fit. But how did I come to a point where that was what I wanted to do? Anyone who knows me will know that actually I often feel a sense of trepidation about telling people that I'm a business coach because it's become one of those things, particularly in the online space. You say, oh, I'm a business coach, and it feels like people always roll their eyes and go, oh no, please don't try and sell to me. Please don't spam me and try and get me to go on a discovery call with you. It can be something where you feel like as soon as you've said you're a business coach, the other person's eyes kind of glaze over a bit and they're like, oh no, you're one of those people. But I'm actually not one of those really cringy coaches, or I hope I'm not anyway. I'm really passionate about business. I started my career in project management. I transitioned into business development. I actually ran a startup company for 4 years. It turned over 7 figures when I left to go on maternity leave. I've seen a lot of different businesses. I've worked in large organisations and for small organisations as well. And so I have a lot of experience of different kinds of business. And I think the biggest thing is that I've seen businesses that are struggling with so many issues. And since I started my coaching business 3 years ago, I've also worked with a variety of small businesses, entrepreneurs, self-employed people. It's been fantastic, the work that I've been able to do, and I've absolutely loved it. There's something so rewarding to me about going into a situation where people are really struggling and just being able to guide them through that process and making sure that they really come out of the other side with tangible results. It's an amazing thing to see businesses grow and evolve. And that's what I love most about the work that I do. So how did I get to a point where I was ready to set up as a business coach? Well, let me tell you, it's not something that happened overnight. In fact, it probably started around 10 years ago. I was the ripe age of 25. I was just finishing my postgraduate degree. I studied at the University of Nottingham. I was an undergrad in history and I stayed on to do a master's in gender history. I adore history. It's just my favourite subject ever. So I had such a wonderful time studying. But during that time, particularly when I was sitting my undergrad finals and in my master's year while I was studying, I just started to be aware that things were not all as they should be. So I was often aware that I was just quite stressed. I've always been quite an anxious person, but it wasn't ever anything that I realised was a real problem for me. It wasn't really until later in my 20s that I even put 2 and 2 together and realised, oh my goodness, I experience anxiety. I just thought that was me being tightly wound and a bit weird, and I felt very self-conscious about it for a long time actually. But it was at that point, kind of just as I was coming to the end of my university studies, I just realised that things weren't going well for me behind the scenes. Emotionally, I was struggling quite a bit. I should have been feeling like the world was my oyster. I had lots of opportunities ahead of me. I got a first class degree, I got a distinction in my master's, but I just had to work so incredibly hard for those results, and it really came at the price of my emotional, my physical health. And it wasn't something which happened overnight. It was something that built up very slowly over the space of a couple of years, really, maybe even 3 years. But I started to get these strange symptoms. So initially, I just remember I was at the part-time job that I had when I was a student, and I just got an upset stomach all of a sudden and felt a bit strange. And then I was like, gosh, maybe I ate something funny, maybe I picked up a bug on campus or something like that. But actually, it became a bit of a pattern for me. So I got better a few days later. And then the following week, I had similar symptoms. And I went to the GP and I said, gosh, I feel a bit strange, keep having really unpleasant symptoms. And they said, oh, it's irritable bowel syndrome. This is really common. It's because of stress. Do you think you are stressed? And I was like, yes, very stressed. And then they gave me medication for it, and it sort of led to a pattern of behaviour, really, where I would take the medication, I would be okay for a while, and then it would just kind of flare up every few months initially. But after a while, it got to the point where it was flaring up kind of every week. And really, after a year or two, I got to the point where I was really struggling to eat anything. I had a lot of kind of sickness. I often felt quite unwell. I felt extremely tired. And the quantities of food that I was able to eat just got smaller and smaller. So I went on to get a graduate job in London, working in Millbank Tower, with just the most amazing view of London out of the window. But I just wasn't really able to enjoy it. It was a brilliant job in so many ways, and it gave me such brilliant experience. But I just really wasn't coping on a day-to-day level. And over the space of 2 years working there, I kind of felt like if I could just hold it together for long enough, then these symptoms would sort of go away. I'd feel a lot less tired. I'd feel a lot less stressed. But I really did get to a point where I just thought, I'm running out of road here, and I don't quite know what I'm supposed to do. I'd never had chronic illness before. I wasn't even really aware that what I was going through was a thing. Now I know the word burnout, and that just describes perfectly what I was going through. But at the time, that wasn't a word that I had to describe how I was feeling. And I just kind of thought, I remember Googling at the time, if I could just take a month off work, have a bit of rest, I could get myself sorted and I could slot into my life, and everything that was a problem with my health and feeling tired and feeling overwhelmed, all of that would just go away. But guess what? That wasn't really how it went. So unfortunately, I got to the point where I was probably having 1 or 2 days off sick a month, which I was so ashamed about, because I really hadn't been the kind of person ever in my life to just, have a ton of time off sick. And it wasn't like I was just like, oh, I can't be bothered to go to work today. I really dragged myself out of bed every day, but it just got to the point probably about once a month where I couldn't do it anymore. And I really did reach that breaking point. So work had got occupational health involved because of my sickness record, and they were really supportive actually, and they said, look, we want to understand what we can do to help you, because I couldn't really articulate what the problem was. I just said, I've got irritable bowel syndrome, and people kind of seemed a bit like, well, loads of people have that, it's not the biggest deal in the world, why is it affecting you this much? And I was like, I don't really know why it's affecting me this much, but I'm really struggling. So I went to see the most supportive, lovely private doctor who just really got it. And firstly, he scared the living daylights out of me, because he said, what you have is not irritable bowel syndrome. It's so off the scale of how much irritable bowel syndrome normally affects people. I really think you need to have some proper investigations and get this looked at. And so that was completely terrifying, because suddenly I was like, gosh, what if I've had actually something quite serious wrong with me this whole time? And I've just been taking these irritable bowel medications and just plugging on with life and ignoring everything and trying to squash it down and act like everything's fine when it clearly isn't. It really was affecting my day-to-day life so much by that point. So I'd gone from being a fairly normal person with a normal social life and lots of friends, and a lot of my family are down in London. So, I saw people regularly, and I was actively involved in my church as well. But gradually, one by one, all these things had to drop out of my life because I was just too tired to do anything. And around that time, I also got married, which was just the most wonderful thing. And I've even found, you kind of think when I get married, all these problems will go away, because you know what happens when you get married, you get your happily ever after and then you never have any problems again. Ha ha ha. But yeah, I found that didn't actually fix things. Things carried on exactly the same. And I was having to spend pretty much all day on a Saturday just sleeping because my body was so exhausted. I couldn't really go out and do anything in the evening. The only thing I could do most weeks was drag myself to church, which is something that me and my husband, we did every week. We're very committed to our church. So that was one of the things that I was like, whatever else happens, I can go to church on a Sunday. But sometimes I really even struggled to do that. And so I was feeling very fed up with everything, because I just felt like, I should be, I was in my late 20s. I should be having a normal, enjoyable life. I should be this kind of person in my prime with all these opportunities in front of me. But my stupid body, I was like, what is your problem? And I think I had a lot of very negative self-talk around that time. So it all came to a head basically because when the report came back from occupational health, the recommendations were just too vague for my HR department to really know how to put them into practice. And so they said, we need to write back to this doctor and ask for clarification. And that had taken a few weeks and there was just no sign of anything. And then just one day, my alarm went off in the morning and something in me just broke. And I was like, I just can't get out of bed today. I just can't do this again. It just is never going to end. And I'm just done. And it was a terrible, terrible point in my life. I think it was one of the worst things that's ever happened to me, because it didn't stop there. I had a terrible sense of guilt over being ill, over not going to work. What followed that point was 3 or 4 months of being on sick leave, and I used to have dreams that I had to go back to my old job, and oh gosh, what was I going to do? It was just so awful. I just couldn't bear to go back. And there was a real sense of failure. Everything in my life that I'd been working to up until that point, I got this, degree education and really had been so excited about what life was going to be like. And yet it just felt like before it even really started, my life was just over. So I really didn't have any concept of whether I'd be able to work again. If you'd have asked me at that time, so that was 2010 that happened. If you'd have asked me then, what do you think your career prospects will be for the rest of your life? I'd just say, well, I don't think I'm ever going to work again. And I wasn't really able to do much of anything for that year at all. I spent basically 7 months in bed. I watched a ton of iPlayer. I've watched so many documentaries. I have learnt a million things about the most trivial matters, but I really couldn't cope with anything for a very long time. I think I just felt like I'd broken my body. I really was so exhausted, and just the toll of like ignoring what my body was trying to say to me and squashing it all down and keeping on going. I just got myself in such a deep hole, and at the time I really didn't think I'd ever get out of it. So how did that lead to me being on the road that I'm on now? Well, let me tell you, recovery from burnout, and if anyone listening to this has ever been through burnout, some people can actually snap back into their old life quite quickly. For some people, they don't actually need to stop their old job. They can just have a rest and go back to it. But that just wasn't an option for me at all. So recovery was incredibly slow. And I remember someone saying to me at the time, I think I'd made, in conversation with them, I'd said, it feels like I thought I'd just be able to go back to work or go and do something else, but I'm really just not able to cope with anything at the moment. And they said to me, don't underestimate how long it could take you to recover from this. What you've been through is huge. And at the time, I just remember thinking, no, it's not. I just got a bit tired. And, and it really wasn't until about 4 years ago, even now, so that is 6 years after it happened, that I was even able to say, well, I think I went through burnout. At the time, I just had no word to describe it at all. So it was a very slow path to recovery. And I guess it was just a case of one day I heard that someone was looking for a part-time administrator, and I just thought, 2 days a week, I think I could do that. But it was such a huge step for me to go back to work. I was so terrified of trying to do a full day in the office. That's not a big deal, is it? But for me at the time, had this narrative of like, I've been through burnout and I can't do anything. So just building up my confidence again, getting to a point where I felt like I could do anything, it really was such slow progress. But I'm just so thankful to my family, to my husband, because there was no judgment from him at all. He was just so supportive to me, and he made it so easy. It just became very clear straight away that it didn't matter if I wasn't going to be able to do anything, contribute anything to our household. So I think just, removing a lot of that pressure was a huge help to me in just such a dark time. But I also, now I actually do feel quite thankful that I went through it, because it was so dramatic, but it was the start of my new life. So I had to literally get to a point where I was like, all of the old rules that I had about how to do life, I've proved that they just don't work. So I had to start again from scratch and just be like, okay, so it's not okay to just push myself to breaking point and to have a really negative self-talk and to be hypercritical of myself. What does it look like if I do life within the energy that I have? And very slowly over the last 6 years, I guess, I've just been taking the next step. And, you know, so that started off with doing one part-time job, and then after a year of doing that, another opportunity to take on a second job arose. And so I was doing a part-time job being an administrator in one office, and then someone with a small business asked me if I could do their invoices for 1 day a week. And then after doing the invoices for a while, we started to realize that actually there was a lot of potential for me to do more for this startup company. And so my role became, after about a year there, actually just running the company and being in charge of the systems and building processes that contributed to us building the business from 6 figures to 7 figures. So it was just an amazing journey, and it really was one step at a time. So I think a massive thing for me as well has been having kids, because as soon as you're a mum, you're needed to have yourself in order. You need to be there for your kids. You need to be ready, you know, to get up any time of the day or night and sort out what's going wrong with the baby. That was such a hard time for me, and I'll talk about that more another time. But at the same time, it's like the fire in which my character is really forged. So I think, again, that was something huge for just proving to myself that I wasn't completely broken, that wasn't the end of my life. I was able to do so much more than I ever realised. And so I decided to take maternity leave from my job at the startup at that point. And after 9 months off, I just thought, you know, I don't really want to go back. Now that my time was quantified in terms of time at work equals time away from the baby, I think I calculated at one point that even if I went back for 2 days a week, I wouldn't see him, because of train times and commute time and that kind of thing. I wouldn't see him awake between Sunday and Wednesday. And I just thought, you know, I don't really want to be that kind of parent. That's not really for me. That's not what I'm after. So I just took the decision to stop my job at the startup. We'd done a lot of growth in that time, and we were sort of at the stage where everything that we put in place to get to the 7 figures mark was going to have to be dismantled and reimagined. And I just thought, you know, I'm ready to hand this on to someone else. So I ended up in a situation just thinking, okay, so what am I going to do now? And that's where like this idea of being a business coach really came from. Because I know a lot of people out there kind of say, oh, I'd really like an online business because online is so awesome, and it's, you know, there's lots of work-life balance and there's all kinds of advantages to it, but I just don't know what I could do. Oh, I know, I'll become a business coach. But for me, it was very much the other way around. So I actually started my business offline before I was online. Even starting as a business coach, that was a massive, massive leap for me. I remember saying to a friend, I think I'd like to work in a sandwich shop and, you know, maybe just help them become like the best sandwich shop in the world, because I really loved that feeling of going somewhere which needed a bit of development, which needed a bit of advice and support, and really helping them build on the foundations that they had already, but getting rid of a lot of those problems that they were experiencing. And my friends just said to me, that's so ridiculous. You know, you don't need to work in a sandwich shop. You just need to be a business coach. That's what would be a really good fit for you. And so I took on a couple of clients just to see, how does this feel? Do I like it? Is this something I want to do? And actually I loved it. And it was one of those moments where you just think, this is totally the thing that I was made to do. And I've realised that and appreciated that more over the 3 years since I started my business. So I started back in 2015, initially working completely offline with small businesses in my local area, and then sort of branching out online and starting to build up an audience there and taking on clients all over the UK, in Europe and further afield, you know, spoken to people in Australia and New Zealand. And it's just amazing what online business can do for those kinds of things. You've always got to factor in time zones and make sure that it's not like 4 a.m. for anyone, but it's just amazing the things that it's been able to do. I think more than that for me, it's just been a real awakening of just thinking, you know, there are certain things that made it really hard for me to be in a 9 to 5, and I did often feel quite tired and overwhelmed, and like you have to be such a high energy person to survive in a London career. And I just had these question marks, particularly after I'd been through burnout. It was just like, I don't know if I'm that person. And so what on earth can I do? And then finding my coaching business just really helped me to feel like this is made for people like me. I think I've always been an entrepreneur, but my own kind of mindset issues and lack of confidence and problems that I'd had, just understanding who I was, it all just made sense all of a sudden. So that's the journey that I've been on over the last 10 years. And I don't know if you can relate to that or if you've been through something similar. It was something that I only really told this story for the first time to my coaching group last September, which even as I'm saying it, I can't quite believe because it's become something that I'm so comfortable talking about. But for a long time, I just felt the biggest sense of shame and a huge sense of failure, and just like, I've really messed up my life just by not taking my health very seriously, not really understanding myself as a person, and just trying to say yes all the time when my body was just screaming no. And so I did have that sense of like, I've let my family down because my parents have supported me through my education and they've encouraged me to go to university and get these wonderful qualifications, and I've enjoyed my studies so much, but I just felt like, this is not the path that I'm supposed to be on. But I'm so thankful that I've set up my business, because it's just been something where I feel like it's rewarding in a way that I never would have experienced if I'd have stayed in a 9-to-5 job. And now that I have a family as well, just the fact that it's so flexible. I didn't take maternity leave when I had my second baby last year in 2017. I just scaled down my business. For most of last year, I worked 6 hours a month, and that was just such a brilliant thing, because I didn't actually want to go on maternity leave the second time. I wanted to kind of keep my normal life going and just sort of welcome a baby into our family, but not be like, oh hey, me as a person, that's on pause because I'm on maternity leave, so I don't do anything that I like to do. I just look after a baby. And that's something that I'll talk about more another time. But thank you so much for listening to this first episode. I hope it's helped you to feel like you've got to know me a little bit as a person and hear a bit of my story. There's loads more that I'd love to tell you, and I'll be sharing that on a future episode, I'm sure. But I'm so excited to be starting this podcast. I've got so many business related things I want to be talking about, discussing, teaching you, sharing with you. I'm so excited to get the ball rolling with this. So join me again for the next episode, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. You've been listening to the Business Club for Grown-ups podcast with Jessica Fernley. To find out more, visit thebusinessclubforgrownups.com.